Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another OSR Tabletop live stream with DM Bloodworth. Welcome to, I already see in the chat is L. So welcome, L. I was much inspired by your request back on either Friday or Saturday, actually Saturday, to give some more notice for these live streams. So I give it about a good 48 hours notice, and then I sent out a really quick, about 4 hours ago, a reminder. So glad to see that you're here, and for the other 3 or 4 people watching at the moment, welcome. Feel free to jump in and throw a comment down. And if you have any topics you want to talk about, but I'm pulling this topic that Elle had just mentioned before going live. And so here we go. I'm sure that this is going to be one heck of a topic. So, what is the real way to play Dungeons and Dragons? So, um, I'll put it out to L since I know he's here, and he kind of brought it up. So hello, Eric. Good to see you as well. So I'm gonna shoot at this topic here. So what is the real way to play D&D? And I will leave that as an open topic for a little bit, and we'll see if anyone wants to bite on that one for a first stab, and we'll see where it goes. In the meantime, I will pop down and give a shout out to everyone. And here we go. The real way is any way that allows you to have fun. And that's pretty much universally said across all tabletop role-playing games, and not just D&D, but believe it or not, there are people who push back on that, and they were like, "Oh, you're not supposed to be running D&D in particular to have fun. D&D is meant for you to grow as a human being and to, cut your deficiencies and to, to improve the world around you. So it is supposed to be some kind of a social engine that drives you forward. And you know what? There's certain aspects of role-playing games in general where you are going to improve by participating in them. All right. But that virtually goes for any kind of a gaming that you're doing, right? I mean, people talk about video gaming as being, video gaming, and they've had scientific studies, as a matter of fact, that showed that video gaming, the ones that like Nintendo or PlayStation and such, game controllers have increased an entire generation's physical, digital manipulation with their hands, and it's increased their motor skills, and it's increased their hand and eye coordination for things like that. So I would certainly argue from my own experience, but I don't think that experience is universal with tabletop role-playing games, that as a young kid playing in the 6th grade, I think I started around the 6th or certainly the 7th grade, started playing D&D, and I was not a great reader in elementary school. I actually had I was part of a pull-out program to go to a reading teacher, and I'll never forget Mr. Sneed. Mr. Sneed walked me through, and I used to have to watch, the white bar, the light would go down and cover each sentence and go down, and I was supposed to just read and then do a comprehension test afterwards. And my reading speed was slow, but my comprehension was always very high. Then one year, this would have been in 7th grade, I think. In 7th grade, I had to go to summer school But we still went on our family vacation, and we were going to have to return sooner because I had summer school. And during that summer, I read The Hobbit and the first during that vacation. I should say, I read The Hobbit and the first two Lord of the Rings novels, all in that time that I was there. So I read close to 1,200 pages in about 5 days. I mean, I just tore right into it. And I don't know if it will. I pretty much say that it was D&D that got me interested in reading, and then I became a voracious reader. And by the time I was in the 8th grade, then I was already reading at pre-college level. And by the 10th grade, I was far into the college level. I no longer needed, after the 7th grade, a reading teacher. That was completely removed, and I was doing fine with both speed and I never had a problem with the comprehension. So, does does role playing games improve you academically? Absolutely. That I would agree with. But is it going to improve you socially in the way that that's being discussed? Like you're going to make the world better around you? It's not designed to do that. Number one, it might help you get out of your shell if you're in a shell and be more comfortable talking with a group of people. But it's not going to turn you into a public speaker per se. I mean, you're not going to be able to go from talking to a group of 4 friends to a auditorium full with 20,000 people. That's just not not a transition that you're going to be able to do based solely on playing games. Uh, Eric used the 4-letter word fun. Yes. And, so when people come out and they say, oh, well, fun isn't supposed to be what you're doing this for, or that is not the end all and be all, is to have fun, I somewhat disagree with that. I mean, if you're not having fun, just imagine if you're sitting at the table and you're not having fun. You're not going to sit at that table for very long. All right. You're certainly not playing D&D or, playing the game that you're looking or running the game that you're looking to run. You're not doing it right if everyone is consistently at your table not happy with what's going on. They're going to stop showing up. All right. And that is your best indicator that you're playing it wrong. The fact that people show up all the time doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing it right either. You're playing it good enough. All right. You're running it good enough to keep them coming. So let's see. D&D is for making movies and role playing only, says the other guy. Yeah, well, first of all, it doesn't make very good movies, number one. For role playing, I see people, I don't mind mentioning Shonner. Shonner doesn't think that D&D is a role playing game at all, and he doesn't believe that you can effectively role play. I mean, he's said it a number of times. I don't agree with him on that, but he looks at it as it's basically a board game in his description, and so just because many players play it that way doesn't make it so, though. It doesn't make it what the game was designed to be. So again, if you're having fun playing it as a board game, though, you're kind of playing it right for you and right for the players at your table. But that doesn't mean that you're playing it correctly. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're playing it wrong, because you're certainly not playing it wrong for yourself or your table. There's ways of telling if that's happening, and it becomes very obvious very quickly. By the way, if anyone wants to jump in and actually join in on this conversation, I'm going to put the link out there. anyone is encouraged to join. So, including those people that that think that I hate them or I don't respect them or whatever. You're welcome to join too. I don't run away from anybody. I don't run away from debating anybody or having a heated discussion with anybody. I will certainly treat anyone that does join in with respect, and I will talk down to you or anything like that. I certainly, that's just not my style. So if anyone wants to jump in, you're welcome to jump in. And for the usual people that usually join with me, you're welcome to come in as well. So any of my normal, people that pop in frequently, you're certainly welcome to. I could take up to, I believe, 9 other individuals on this account. So you're welcome to jump in. So let's see. We were poor as kids. We couldn't afford a ball. So we played dodgeball with rocks. Yeah, that's that's definitely a Generation X thing, right? Always going to the extreme. I mean, I'm the same thing. I was a child of the 70s and a teenager of the early 80s, and it was just a wild time. And I know everyone is nostalgic about when they're growing up, and that was always the best time to grow up and such. But I'm not sure if that's always true. I mean, there's got to be some decades that were just sucky to grow up in. But anyhow, let's see. Hey, Redshift, how's it going? Good to see you here. And if you want to chime in with anything, you're certainly welcome to do so. If you want to jump in, just hit that invite just above your comment, and I will post it up here as well. So anyone that wants to jump in, all you have to do is click on that, and you will come into the waiting room, and I will bring you right in to the chat. So let's see. Eating dinner, hard to talk. All right. Well, enjoy your dinner. I'm solo for this weekend, so I just had a roast beef sandwich for dinner. So my wife and kids will get home sometime tomorrow evening from their mini girls' weekend out vacation. So let's see. So what I'm hearing is that there are many ways to play, as there are people, since everyone likes 15. Different things. Yes, of course. I mean, it's just like anything, right? My older brother and I went to see the last voyage of the Demeter. All right, it's a Dracula movie, and the critics. After watching the movie, we looked at the critic scores on Rotten Tomatoes, and they gave it something like a 40 something, which we were like, what? That's just crazy. And then we started reading some of the critics, reviews, and the one was like, oh, well, it was very predictable. It was like, well, no shit, you all know that Dracula survives the trip from Romania to London. I mean, that's just a known thing. So you kind of knew how it was going to turn out. That wasn't the point of the movie, and so to give it like 1 star based on that is kind of stupid. So you can change the fact that when people look at different when different people look at the same thing, they're going to walk away with it with a different view. That's just human nature. If there's 100 people in the room, you're going to have 100 different opinions about every single thing. Now, those opinions might be, so close to each other that it falls different just on the slightest of nuance, but there's still going to be a slight difference everywhere that you go. I mean, we change our own opinions about things very, very often. And so even our own opinions about things can be altered, in the slightest of way, and it becomes something just new. It becomes a new perspective that even we have. So getting back to our the banner question that I got from L, basically, or I took his one thing and said that, the real way of playing D&D, and I kind of ran with it. So what is the real way of playing D&D? Well, again, it's going to be different for every single person. And to go with what Eric had put out there, people are, it's who's having fun, and for them, that's going to be good. Now, when you're running your table, the 4 or 5 other players at your table, or maybe you have less, or maybe you have more, but every single player at your table is going to be experiencing a different experience. They're going to have different levels of fun and frustration, sometimes at the same time. They're going to go through an ebb and flow of both enjoyment and frustration throughout the entire course of the game session. And so if you ask each player at any given time, hey, what are you thinking about this game so far? They are going to give you a different answer at each time that you say something, unless they're really consistently enjoying it or consistently frustrated. And that usually doesn't happen. They're going to keep on going back and forth between, how they feel about either how the session is going along, or whether or not they like the game system. Maybe it's the first time they're playing that game system, and they're not going to come to the table knowing what is the right way to play this game. They're there to figure it out and to discover it on their own. Hopefully, if you're the game master, you're prompting them along the way, but you're gonna insert your own bias too, and so you're kind of trying to coax them towards liking your way of playing the game, or the way that you're running the game. So it's a complicated question, and I don't think that there's a correct answer to that, but I'm certainly willing to listen to everyone's input on what it could be, what it might be. Someone wants to be bold enough and come in there and say, this is what it is. I'd love to chat with you and see, maybe you can convince me, hey, you know what, that's a really good idea. And maybe I can see that that's the best way to go with that particular element. So let's see what else we have here. Let's see. So Eric made Parmesan ranch chicken, homemade, nice. It's better than the dinner I had. This is my follow-up here. All right. Either way, we are all right the way we play, or we're all wrong. Yeah, I mean, let me think of a time when I was running a session and it went completely to shit, and it was my fault. I just remembered one. At one time, so this was a D&D campaign that I was running. I was running a D&D Basic and Expert, and this was fairly early on. And one of my players was he was playing a cleric, and his cleric was lawful, and his cleric was going to. His cleric just said that he was going to execute a prisoner. That's what his character was going to do. And then I reminded him that that was, potentially going to cause an alignment conflict. But I certainly opened him up to, allow him to do it. And then he started to strongly argue that, since this prisoner was clearly chaotic, that it would be within his deity's, purview to just slaughter this guy. And again, I said, you're welcome to do it. I'm just warning you that there may be a consequence for that. And so he got kind of pissed off about it. And but he didn't follow through with it. But another player had his character who had no qualms with doing it. He was a neutral character, and so he just slit the guy's throat, and they moved on. But I could tell that the player of the cleric was pissed off, felt like I took away his agency, and so I thought about it a bit, and certainly afterwards I thought about it a bit, and I did think that, what, I shouldn't have tried to steer him in a direction by giving him that warning. I should have just let him go with it, and then decide later if I really felt like it was necessary to create a consequence for making that action. And so I went back to him, a couple weeks later, because I was thinking about it for quite some time, and I said, you know what, I apologize for not for trying to push that idea through a consequence, on you, and it was it was just something that we just disagreed on, and over alignment, which I normally don't even focus on that much anyway. So that's why I take most of the fault for it. So was that a wrong way to play? Absolutely. Or a wrong way to run the game? Absolutely. Because I let my own bias kind of get in the way of letting the player just make a choice for his character and letting it go like that. I would have been much better off just leaving it to where it was. So was he playing the game wrong? Game-wise, possibly, but his way, no, not in his mind. And I couldn't convince him that he was playing wrong. He was just playing the game. And it wasn't, it's not prohibited from doing that in the game. So I'll take more fault for it than he should have taken for his decision. So let's see. Oh boy. All us GMs have made horrible mistakes in the past. I can own up to many. Yeah. I mean, it's, if you run from many, and that was like the most recent one that I can think of. And that was, 3 years ago. If one of my players comes in here, they're welcome to say, hey, no, you made this other mistake. And, we'll certainly talk about it and laugh about it. But, that mistake goes back at least 3 years. And that's the one in my recent history that really stands out for me, is that, I made a mistake, and I own that. So making mistakes is necessary, and the process a part of learning. And you're going to make those mistakes even as an experienced game master. So there's another kind of a debate over, how experienced is it? Do you need to be in order to be called an experienced game master? And some people will say, oh, you need 20 years of experience. And others will say, oh, well, you could have the equivalent of 20 years of experience in just 6 months if during that 6 months time you are running games phenomenally well. All right. And there's probably a little bit of truth to both of those things, right? length of time doesn't necessarily mean quality of time, and vice versa. Um, you can be you can be running games for a very short period of time, but you do it extremely well, and so you might outweigh the benefit of playing with somebody with 20 years experience, right? So it can go either way. Again, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, between the two. As long as we learn from our mistakes. Yes, absolutely. And it's like something I mentioned the other like last week when I did a live stream, and I was talking about I came across this one idea that rule zero it was a dispute over rule zero, and then the idea that rule zero is supposed to be a temporary change to fill in a gap of a game rule, and then you reset at the end of the campaign or even at the end of that session. And I totally disagreed with that. I was like, no, if you find that there's a gap in the rule, and then you rule zero it, you create a rule to fill in that gap. You're not going to reset that. That doesn't make any sense to reset that for a new campaign. No, you're going to jot that down on a piece of paper. You'll make it part of your list of homebrew notes, and you're going to rule zero becomes homebrew once you find something that fills in a gap and works well, or once you find a change in a circumstance, a rule or whatever that works really well for your table, and you'll be convinced, I'm just going to continue doing this all the time now. If you reset back to zero again, back to rules as written, including those gaps, then you haven't learned anything. You haven't learned from it wasn't your mistake. You haven't learned to modify or change the mistakes in the writing of the game. All right. And so, yeah, it should always be learning as you're running games, as you're playing games. You should always be learning throughout, no matter how long you've been at it. You should still be learning. So let's see. Hey, O'Neill, how's it going? Eric, I don't remember, to be honest with you. That was my Homebrew World. So I don't remember what day was I using. He might have been his deity might have been Mitra. I think during that campaign I was using Hyborian Hyborian deities. So he was worshiping Mitra. I'm almost certain I'm remembering that correctly. That particular campaign, lasted until they hit roughly 4th level, and then the new school year started, and I had to change my schedule, and that pretty much ran for the that pretty much ran from, I'd say, about May to the first week of September. So a couple months. That ran for a few months, and that was my second. That was the second of my D&D Beck Me campaigns that I had been running. So let's see who else we have. Command Post Gaming, welcome. I don't recognize. So if this is your first time, welcome to the live stream, and feel free to comment in there along the way. I'm going to get caught up with comments in a second here. So Ajax, hey, how's it going? I volunteered at 2 local libraries at the and to have to say my teen girl players love to interact with NPCs, and the boys like combat more. I switched out 5e for Adventure Conqueror King. So far so good. I can't. Let me take a sip. So yeah, I mean that's cool. That would be an interesting thing, like to hear like what your what's the real major differences between the two systems, and the fact that you're getting younger players, teenagers, to move from 5e to Axe is also kind of interesting. I'd love to hear about that as well. So let's see. Rational Ginger, hey, how's it going? I think the issue is some players don't have the social skills to really play. They get main character syndrome. Yeah, I guess so. And as a game master, you can create the perception that the world is a very dangerous place without necessarily having to have PCs get killed. But if when I've run campaigns and I saw that the player characters just weren't really getting into the circumstances where their characters nearly died or whatever, I would knock off an NPC that they cared about, just to send the message that no, this world really is a dangerous world, and I want you always to keep that in mind. So with the main character syndrome, if they're anticipating the fact that their character could die, that should help take care of some of the main character syndrome. The other thing that you can do in that case is you can have them make a backup character, and then once a month for just a portion of your game session, have them interact like everybody has a backup character, or everyone has once they become high enough level. I had my players create or select henchmen that it was their first followers once they got to a certain level, and had them operate with those characters for an in-town kind of situation. Again, just to kind of break it up a little bit, and then get right back into their main characters and continue forward with it. But it was just something to change that mentality of I'm just going to focus on one character kind of thing as well. So just my suggestions. Yeah, so a compatible play style. Yeah, I agree with that. That compatible play styles just means not having play styles that are polar opposites of each other, right? So if you have half your group like social interaction and the other half likes pure combat, you could figure out ways of intermixing them, even amongst their adversaries. Like I like to create adversaries that my players my players characters ends up actually respecting to a certain degree, and so it's not just pure hatred for their opponents. They at least will give them an honorable defeat, or are not in like vendetta mode against them. Like, I'm not only going to kill you, but I'm going to kill everyone that you've ever known or loved in your, and have them totally go full murder hobo on them as well. So yeah, but compatible play styles, as long as it's not polar opposites, you should be able to pull that off and do that combination of social interaction and combat. They are not polar opposites. That's what many people might actually mistake, that of the three pillars, that you have to be solidly in one and only marginally touch the others. No, you can mix and match them. You can be all three, and put equal amount of time into all three, or almost all in two of them. But you'd be hard pressed, if you're role playing, you'd be hard pressed not to engage in all three pillars to a certain extent. There's a set of rules. If I pick up cards and start playing with them and say I'm playing gin rummy, but don't follow me the gin rummy rules, I'm not playing gin rummy. Yes, if you change certain rules, or if you change so many rules that you're no longer playing the same game, that's something that Gary Gygax actually warned against. He said that number one, you don't have to follow all of the rules. And actually, he recommended that you don't. But then he also said, and he frequently did this too, he said, but there are certain things that are essential rules, but he didn't lay out exactly what they were at that time. And I'm talking directly from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So certain things were essential rules, and I learned later what some of those were from reading some of his other articles and his books and everything. Essential rules to him was the racial modifiers for the different races, the level limits for demi-humans, because he felt that no one would ever play a human if you didn't have the level limits on demi-humans. He felt that alignment was an essential, otherwise people would not engage in a heroic fantasy, which is what the game design was meant to do. And probably some others, like you have to have hit points, you have to have AC, and those kinds of things. So there were certain rules that were essential rules that you could not change. Now, could you alter hit points? I don't know anyone. Oh no, I shouldn't say that. I know at least one or two, but 90% of the people running these games give maximum hit points at first level. It is rare to come across somebody who doesn't do that. And that's because at first level, your characters are too squishy, especially if they only rolled a 1 for hit points. It's really an unplayable character. I don't care how you have to twist and turn everything to make that character survive. It's more work and effort on the part of the DM and the player that it's worth. Or give them the option to take, you can take 2/3 of your hit points, or you can roll. But I'm still not going to let you go with a 1 hit point character. You could do something like that. So they're only rolling to see if they got higher than the 2/3 of their normal hit point total. So that's making a rules modification that doesn't break the rules. He also said that if you change so many things, you're no longer playing. So to this post command post gaming, I have often said that I've played for GMs in 5e where they stripped the death saves and the short rests and the feats or many of the feats and such. And at that point, they were no longer playing 5e. They were really looking to play second edition or first edition AD&D. And I was like, why don't you just play that game then? Because you're stripping everything out to make it. Now, I agreed that it was making it a better game because I think all of those are weak points of 5e. But it did make it did make a significant enough of a change in a number of different areas that you were no longer playing 5e. And so I would agree that if you change so many rules and you're not playing the game anymore, then you might as well play a different game. Yeah, I mean it's so yes, a good DM can have a bad session, but good players can really make the session flow well. As some of you may know, I am a retired school teacher. I taught in the middle school primarily, and I was a union rep in my school. I taught for 26 and a half years, And when, I had people talk about, well, bad teachers will always ruin a class. I was like, no, that's just not the way. I was like, a bad teacher with a good class of kids is going to become a better teacher. Hands down, over the 26 years I've seen it. All right. A a really good teacher with bad students is going to struggle. All right. And a really good teacher with good students is going to be at peak performance, right? It's so yeah, a good teacher could have a bad day, but if they have good students, they'll get through. Absolutely. Just like what you're saying. Um, Bad teacher, bad students, that's going nowhere. That is absolutely not going anywhere. All right. So if you have a bad DM and bad players, that thing might as well just shut down. All right. It's not going to go anywhere at all. Um, and if you have a bad DM and complacent players, like players that I'm just glad to have somebody here that'll run these things for me, you're not doing yourselves any favor either. All right. And you're certainly not helping that DM get better at it, because you're not going to point out what they could have done better. Now, they might not respond well to that. They might flip out and, have a table flipping thing going on. That just tells you that, you got to go to a different table. That's not going to last. So let's see here. I don't think that it's a lack of social skills, but rather a hangover for CRPGs where everyone is chosen one, social media, which encourages narcissism. Yeah, I guess so. If you're only doing solo play, and then you suddenly jump into a multiplayer game, and then this could be on computer games as well. Yeah, you have to develop a wholly different mindset when playing. So I played for over a decade, exclusively MMOs. From being a guild leader to being just a player in guilds, large guilds, small guilds, monstrously large guilds, thousands of players in there where you kind of get lost in the shuffle. And in every one of those different experiences, I had to play the game differently based on those. And you always had the player that still, even if they were a member of the guild, was still playing kind of solo. And if that's possible, you let it slide because they're doing other things that still benefit the guild as an overall. But I've also been in guilds where they had these like minimum requirements of, this is how much time you have to log in every week, and these are the events that you must take part in and such. And I've seen that across many, many different MMOs, that kind of a dynamic as well. And so if you're playing any one game or any one genre or any one style of game or such, you are inhibiting your growth and your participation in the hobby. So you're always best served. All right. Again, in my opinion, you are always best served by expanding your horizons, playing multiple games, multiple platforms, multiple genres, and running games, playing games, just getting as much experience in a tabletop role-playing hobby as you can. And you're going to see that your time both running games and playing games is going to improve just from that growth of experience. So again, we get back to that length of experience, as opposed to quality of experience. All right, if your length of experience time, you could run the same game for 40 years with the same group of 5 players in the same kind of a method that you've been playing. You're sitting at your kitchen table for the last 40 years playing with your lifelong friends, and and you never change it up, you're going to have less experience than someone who has been playing for 5 years at a variety of different tables with a variety of different genres, and with different groups of people. They are going to have more experience than you, all right, because you have inhibited yourself to just one thing for too long. So let's see. Expectation skew, yes. Expectations, expectations are, it's like improv game, yes. Yeah, you need to shatter certain expectations, change them up, and your players will benefit from it. And yes, the games are very improvisational. If you're tied too much to the rules and too much to the running a railroad adventure, then you're not doing your players a service, and you're not growing as a game master if you're doing that. You have to train yourself to be flexible, and ready to shift in every direction. Again, I go back to my experience as a teacher. um, there have been lesson plans that I've written that just didn't quite get the question out to the students the right way, or it just didn't. And if I had, like, 80% blank stares, I was like, oh shit, that question's not working right. Let me try something else. And I had to be fast. And anytime that I was evaluated, and I had like an assistant principal or even the principal come in and say, well, we talked about your lesson. I watched your lesson run. And then when we come back and I look and I see that you have notes on your lesson plan that you changed from what you told me you were going to do, and what you actually did was slightly different from that. And then I would say, well, that's what happens sometimes when you have to find out what's going to work. And you'll notice on my notes that for each of my 5 classes, there are different notes and different modifications in different areas. All right. And then I rewrite that whole lesson to test it out, the next time, the next group of kids or next year, and I'm going to modify it again, and that's what you have to do as a game master, is that you have to be prepared to make any changes to what you have already created. And that's why a lot of times they'll tell you, don't create, just create like a framework, just a couple general ideas of where you think the session, where you would like for the session to go, but you have to be prepared for your players to bring you in different directions. Now you might try to curve them back in the long run back over to where you were kind of hoping that they would get to. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that. But for the most part, you have to be flexible. I think that's partially true, although, to be honest, people sometimes have the wrong idea about D&D. Or just in general. I mean, D&D is not the ideal tabletop role-playing game. And so that if that's the idea, if that's the idea that someone has about D&D, that it is the perfect game, or that it's the best tabletop role-playing game out there, no, it's not the best tabletop role-playing game out there. And I'm not even getting into the additions or whatever. For what it looks to do, it does it in a very inefficient and sometimes confusing way. Um, and that comes, overall from having, from at times, in its publication cycles, it's been too complicated, to be honest with you. I mean, 1E was complicated for certain things. I think 2E streamlined some things but added more bloat in others. And then 3E compounded on that. 4E was was a totally different animal. 4E was almost like Immortals for Beckme, right? It was like just a totally different game, and you really couldn't call it Dungeons and Dragons. And I personally don't call 5E Dungeons and Dragons post the first three core books. So everything that followed after that, all of those supplemental books that continue to add more classes, add more races, add more, modify core elements of what made D&D D&D. I stopped considering it to be Dungeons and Dragons altogether. So virtually everything post like 2017 or 18, I don't consider D&D. Again, that's just me. Others might disagree. That's what I mean. The expectations are skewed. They need to be a better understanding of the nature of the game. Yeah. That's pretty much it. I talked to the microphone and my phone has skewed more than one word. Sorry. Oh, it's like, yes, the talking into the phone, you always get weird words. So let's see what else that we have here. The phone shouldn't be studied with literary words differently. Yes. Let's see. Ajax. That is what Gary Gygax said. Girls don't play the same as boys. Well, the way he was talking about that at the time, I mean, he was basically talking about left hand, right side brain kind of thing where, girls were not doing the tactical, mathematical kind of thing, and the male players were more focused on combat, and they were more so into the tactical thinking and stuff like that. Do you have girls that can do either? Do you have boys that can do either? Of course you can. I mean, there's always exceptions to every one of those things, but he was talking kind of generically, and he was talking with a broader brush than maybe he should have. He could have nuanced that a lot. I mean, I know he could have been more specific exactly what he was talking about. Yeah, well, that's the one thing that I think that people need to start to understand. And this is not just kids like you're talking about. This is adults too that don't quite understand that. Just because something is more popular doesn't make it better. And I mean, that is clearly, the analogy I use for that is the McDonald's hamburger. The McDonald's hamburger, I don't think anyone, if they had a choice of 5 burgers in front of them, that they would choose the McDonald's hamburger over any of the others. But McDonald's hamburgers sell more than any other hamburger because they are easily accessible, and it has the highest brand recognition. But compare the McDonald's hamburger to the Burger King hamburger, and there's no comparison. The Burger King hamburger was a better burger. Is the Wendy's burger better than that? Yes. Is the is the White Castle burger better than the I would put it probably on the same level. It's just different to the McDonald's hamburger, but I don't think it's better than a Burger King or a Wendy's or any of the other hamburgers. Then you go to the better places that are like Five Guys or Whataburger or Shake Shack burgers or any of those things. And then if you go to restaurant burgers, you're getting and then your homemade burgers are going to beat many of those other ones, and certainly will beat McDonald's. If you're if you're home barbecuing a burger that's not as good as a McDonald's burger, throw out your barbecue and and hang it up. You shouldn't be barbecuing. So so yeah, I think that you have to shatter through the idea that just because it's popular, it doesn't mean that it's better. It's certainly, again, in my opinion, certainly not a better game system than most of them out there. Okay, we're talking about the Chinese chips and the phones. I've always preferred having a mix of men and women in the game because of those differences. Yes, and I too. I prefer to have at least one female player, which I've had for quite some time now. Um, I've again back in my MMO days, I've had female, women guild leaders, made great guild leaders. I've had women's fellow players bring a different kind of a play style, oftentimes as gritty, if not more gritty than male players, particularly in PvP focused games. Women are absolutely ruthless in games like EVE Online and Pirates of the Burning Sea and any of the games that I played that were very heavily focused on player versus player. Female players were ruthless as hell. Um, and so there's benefit, just like I have a personal preference. I really do like playing with individuals who are, either military veterans or in active service. And a good number of my players are actually veterans. And I think that veterans bring something to the table that is different than what other players bring to the table as well. And it's not just a maturity level. It's because sometimes we veterans can be immature as hell as well. But there's just a different reliability, let's say, that they bring to the table. So and that's what I like, and that's more meta than it is in game theory as well. But they also tend to make bolder decisions as for their player characters. So again, it's maybe just a bias that I have, or I just see it that certain way. And it's a preference, and we all have preferences. So most people like to play whatever game as long as they aren't expected to do a lot of the work of the game, workout of the game. Only a few hards care about rules. Most players don't. Yeah, you know what? I can agree with that too. I mean, I've had players point out a rule here or there, but they're very quick to not want it delay the game. My players have always said to me when they had a little thing, well, let's not spend the time now. Let's just wait until after, and then we can look it over again. Just go with your decision, and we move forward. And again, that's fortunate. I'm fortunate with really good players, and so they carry with them through their experience and the quality of their gameplay, the idea that let's keep the play flow going, and we can always address those things later on. Yeah. And then there'll be people that argue, it's like, oh, we hate the idea when you say, well, that's what my player character would do. And they attack that. If you're, you know, if you're fairly consistent with your barbarians, um, um, with your barbarians behavior being that consistent, then the other player character should have kind of expected that could happen, and they could have been at the ready to either distract him, take him to another room, or do something along those lines, or be prepared to react if they were getting annoyed with the king as well, and just kind of roll with it, which would be kind of fun thing to do as well. So, but yeah, I mean, that's something that you have to sometimes anticipate and just let your players go with it, and then just roll with it. But make the changes as needed going forward. It could end up to a total party wipe, right? Um, if that's what happens, that's what happens. You can't be afraid to let that kind of a thing happen again. All of your players are going to learn something about that. All right. If that ends up being the ultimate result. If it doesn't, but they end up all getting locked up or whatever, then you have to do a little bit more work to get them out of that situation if possible. But if not, that becomes a learning experience. Yeah, all of the games, every game, even today, even games today have optional rules. Even in their core rule books, they'll identify certain rules as being optional, and you as the game master are going to choose those. Sometimes your players might suggest to you, "Hey, I'd like to use this optional rule. Are you going to allow it?" And you'll take a look at it and decide for yourself if you're going to allow it or not. I mean, I've told my players, no, I'm not going to allow that, and that's where it got left. Even in hard set rules, there's certain hard set rules that I don't like either. And I've told my players, no, I'm not going to. I think that kind of is not a good rule, and so I'm homebrewing that out, and we're just going to roll without it. So yeah, you have to make those decisions sometimes as a game master, and you have to kind of stick to it. Otherwise, your players want you to make decisions and to stick to them. They want consistency, and they want you to make those decisions so that they don't have to keep on asking if they can do things. They can just tell you what they're doing and then find out what happens afterwards. As a forever player, I hated GM stuff. I agree, players don't need the rules, but the game system must fit the mood. Yeah, and if you feel like you're a forever player, I would recommend I'll let you try to put together a group. The one good thing about a game master or a dungeon master, whatever you want to call it, is that we are the limited commodity. We're the more sought after, and so if you put out a game and you say I need 3 to 5 players, you're going to pick up 3 to 5 players virtually for any game that you're looking to run. So I would, instead of just being the forever player, unless you just don't like doing the GMing stuff, but I would start out with a small group if you haven't tried this already, and see how that helps you out. Maybe you will find that, hey, you know what? I don't like all the complexity of putting together, something for 5 or 6 players. Go with one player. It is a totally different experience when you're playing one-on-one with one player, and everything becomes focused on that character, and it becomes becomes really easy to create adventures and challenges for just one player character, and you might find that you really enjoy doing that. So I recommend you give it a try instead of having not tried. I don't know how much you've actually tried, and you'll probably get to it down here below. Let me try to get caught up on some of these comments. Until you get a so Eric, just start them at half, and then say if you want to roll for more than that, then you roll. Um, You know what I'm saying? I thought the same thing, and I was like, you know what? You can either roll or you can get 2/3. So if it was a D6, you would have a 4. Um, so I went along with that. You can choose a 4, or you could roll for a 5 or a 6. And if you don't get the 5 or the 6, you at least have 4, and go with that. The D8, I think, was a 5. I might not be doing 2/3 just off the top of my head, but the D10 was 6 or 7. Because I would round up and everything like that. So you could do it that way. I did the same thing with starting money too. I was like, you can either roll or you can take this. And in many cases, but if you roll under what the base was, you'd get the base, that kind of thing. So I would do that instead of just having them roll or keep on rolling until they get something. Referring to the disagreement you have with clerics, maybe the overly simplified alignment system was to blame, and disagreement had with the player. Yeah, and that's possible too, because my my hang up on the lawful was it was not complicated enough. You're probably right, because even when I was a player in a D&D first edition, we used to use my DM suggested that we use a third emphasis, so my character tended to be chaotic neutral with a good emphasis. In other words, my neutrality kind of leaned more towards good. And then I've had other characters that were chaotic neutral with an evil emphasis. And so if push came to shove, they would normally align closer with the evil and being chaotic evil than they were chaotic neutral. But it opened the door for them to every once in a while still have that random act of good, or random act of evil, and still remain. But it would be more of an emphasis or a trend towards that emphasis. Yes. Back in the day, we didn't care so much about re-rolling characters. So let's see, another live stream. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? So Andrew is one of my players. So as I mentioned before, I'm liking this no life at home for one more thing. Yes. Yeah, my wife and kids will be home tomorrow at sometime in the late evening on Tuesday. So yes, another live stream. But I advertised this one back on Saturday, so you've had 48 hours to know. So let's see what else. I was hacking 5e so much to turn it into something else. It wasn't. Eventually switched to another game. Yeah, and that's something that I said earlier on. Is that and that's something that Gary Gygax actually said too. It was like, if you change it so much, then it's no longer the same game. Just change games. Remember, there is a link if you want anybody to join. Yeah, thank you for reminding me, Elle. And if anyone wants to join, there is the link, and you can jump in. Death saves. We're talking about death saves. If only is the only thing from 5e I do like. I know I'm in the minority. Yes, you are, Eric. you are definitely in the minority. I like the tension of trying to help a fallen party member without knowing exactly how long they have left. There's better systems for that than the death save, though. There's like Shadow Dark has like a timer. There's like a 1d4 plus Constitution bonus timer. That puts the number of rounds the character may last without being magically healed, or having their blood loss stopped by other means. And so there are other ways of doing it than the death saves. And you can easily implement that as well without having to really, you're just removing a rule. You're not really creating anything new by that. Yes. Yeah, you could save somebody within like the first round and stop them from at least bleeding. And then some systems will let you, like if you cast a heal spell, you can only heal them up to levels 0 hit points, and then they would require another heal to get them beyond that. Or in some cases, they don't allow for beyond that. Now you have to heal um, for a week to gain 1 point for every point that you were in the negatives, and all kinds of different rules. There's a bunch of optional rules in AD&D First Edition that that prevent you from doing anything for sometimes weeks. If and that's where you play another character, if that's going to be the case. But I never liked death at -10. At higher levels, 10 points was basically no buffer at all. Yeah, it's just a difference. Yeah, it is better than death at 0. One little bandage can mean life or death. Yes, it can. In many, many different systems, by the way. Yeah, in my group, we have, and actually, Andrew is a cleric in our group. And in my group, players would oftentimes, especially the clerics, would oftentimes drop whatever else they were doing to run to somebody to, hit them up with a quick heal. Um, and in one case, one of the situations that we're in, our cleric Mirador was engaged with an orc. They were only second level at the time, and the halfling thief went down with a gut shot. He got hit with a critical hit to the gut, and he went down. And Mirador just dropped what he was doing, exposed himself to being attacked with pluses. He basically turned his back on his attacker to take a couple steps forward to drop a heal to save the halfling's life. And in the meantime, being attacked with by an orc with a scimitar that could have easily killed him in one solid hit as well. So yeah, having in combat, healing and trying to aid one another really does play into that heroic aspect of what the game is supposed to do. Hey, Cal, how's it going? I'm only gonna get wider. That's a problem. I'm only gonna get wider. I don't know what you're talking about. Did I miss your comment earlier? No, I don't know what that means. So anyway, hello, Cal. How's it going? Let's see what else we have, or anyone new. And Thurston Howell, the fourth, welcome. Sometimes you have to have the F around and find out. Yes, that is true. Rules should always be handled consistently because players will certainly expect that. Yes, absolutely, Worst Cat. Absolutely. That is the one thing, the hallmark of a bad game master is a inconsistent game master. You're going to be seen as being either unorganized, unfocused, or unfair, and just totally inexperienced when that occurs. I disagree. D&D isn't inefficient or complicated. That was Gary and his AD&D nonsense of tournament rules. Well, yeah, but they integrated those into the system. Like AD&D was really designed for tournament play, and certainly modules were too. I mean, many of those modules, especially the really brutal ones, were all tournament play modules. So yes, there are, but some were inefficient. I mean that's for damn sure. And Gary later on pointed out, oh no, don't use that. That was just I mean, grappling rules. Anyone complicated as hell, inefficient. Um, Having sword speed, weapon speed modifiers, another waste of time and unnecessary. There were a lot of things that just would have been better off doing away with. When I compare using the two hit charts in AD&D versus having a target number in Castles and Crusades, I can't wait to see how much smoother a CNC campaign goes compared to my 2-year long AD&D campaign, because I know the combats are going to go much smoother when I don't have to look at some freaking chart to see, well, did you hit an AC -1 or that kind of a thing. Now it's like the players will start to determine, oh, I'm pretty sure this thing has an AC of 16 and I get a +2 on my roll, and so I know that I need to roll a 14 or better in order to hit this thing. Don't have to look at a chart. It doesn't matter what the hell your level is or nothing. So much more streamlined, so much less complicated than AD&D First Edition. That the rules are definitely inefficient and complicated to a certain amount, to a certain degree. Yes, and most people do prefer rulings over rules. It just leads to better and smoother gameplay. Unless the rules of the game are so simple that there really is no need for flexibility. But for the most part, I like tournament rules because I'm a war gamer. Yeah, and that gets back to what Gary really was. Gary was a war gamer, more so than a role play gamer. Even though he had his ideas on role playing and such, but he was a war gamer at heart. And I have members in my group that played with him, worked for TSR back then, and and that guy tells me all the time that Gary still ran his war game sessions all through all through the years at TSR, and continue to do so thereafter. So that never changed for him. 11 time is simultaneously something we are always trying to achieve in wargaming. Certainly the worst explained concept on social media. One-to-one time. I read it differently. Yes, one-to-one time is just unnecessary. He didn't do it. So anybody that still thinks that he did it is just bonkers. I've heard it from his sons. I've heard it from his players. He did not use one-to-one time at his table, or very, very rarely did he use one-to-one time at his table. And then the people that claim that, like the Bro OSR, was like, oh, he didn't come to that conclusion until the 90s. No, he didn't do it at his own table. His sons told me that. His player told me that he very rarely used one-to-one time running Dungeons and Dragons at his home game table. So let's see. Well, according to those, so I'm looking at this, that one-to-one time does not mean real time. That's the part that is always misexplained. Um, they're not really misexplaining it. What they're doing is that they're explaining it as correctly, but it was never done. So it wasn't actually used, and so that's that's where it gets. That's what is missed. It is missed not in its explanation. It's missed because they didn't realize that he never actually used it or very rarely used it, and it doesn't work outside of wargaming. All right, that is a wargaming thing, not a role playing thing. All right, so let's see if we get anybody new and come off of the one-to-one time. Um, yeah, I'm not going to focus more on that. Um, if you're having a lot of fun playing at one-to-one time, um, I don't know if that's supposed to be 14 or 1 to 4 time. I don't know. I don't know if that's just not coming off in your if you're using your phone. Um, if you're having fun doing it, fine. But that the way that it's described by like Jeffro Johnson and others that really push for it, um, you need too much time in between games controlling what the heck is going on, and I don't know how. I mean, I'm semi-retired and I don't have that kind of time, so I don't know how anybody with a life outside of gaming has the time to truly dedicate to that play style. But it's simply that it's a play style. It's not the right way to play. It is just a play style. It is one of the ways to play. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Yeah, worst cat, it's wargaming. That's what it is. It's wargaming. It's not, I didn't even like when I tried the West Marches method of, you go out, you go through a couple hexes, then you have to return back to exactly where you started out. And each time you go out, you're going to look for a new location that you can stay the night over, but you always had to return back on the same session where you left out. And it was just, there was nothing to it. There was no story to it. There was no, it was just a boring way of doing it. It was like, all right, you go into this new hex and you do a random encounter and you've encountered something. It's not connected to anything else that you've done before. Oh, look, it's time to start heading back. You better hope that you get back to your starting village. Otherwise, you can't play next week. Next week, you'll have to play with different characters and go in a different place or a different location to move to or whatever. And those characters, by some means, knows what the other characters already did, or they might go over the same tracks that the other party did and find nothing during their 12-hour trek, and now they have to turn around and come back having accomplished nothing. All right, and now they can rest. Otherwise, they can't play next week either, and it just becomes just nonsense. Macro, like you say, it's a macro management system. It's like it's just not what role playing is. It's what wargaming is. again, you might have fun doing it with certain systems, and it really does depend on how you're implementing it. I am sure that you're not implementing it like a West Marches kind of way where you always have to return back. Or if you're doing it with Star Wars, sure, it'll work in Star Wars because they just hit their, they just hit their fast drives and they're back home in a blink of an eye. All right, so it's not working in a fantasy role playing game where you're walking on foot or possibly have horseback, but you're not covering long distances very quickly in order to continue playing or to continue exploring further and further out. That's a difference between being in a starship and walking. Hmm. Agreed. All right, let's see if we come out of that conversation because we can go back and forth with one to one. Yes, Magnificent Seven. Yeah, it's too damn tedious and too much paperwork. Too much paperwork to do. It's like I don't need to function as like an accounting firm in between game sessions to remember who is on what schedule and so on and so forth, and who can use what characters and who did what, what group of characters went over this particular piece of land and what did. This is craziness. It's not role playing. It's something else. Yeah, which is why you don't do it. All right. Reading this, it's an exaggeration. It's not that much of an exaggeration. It really isn't. And I know what you're, I know that if you're implementing it and you're so used to doing it that way, that for you and your group, it's going to run a lot smoother than most, but most don't have that kind of time to dedicate to playing. They have 3 days a week, 3 hours a week, on average. They have 3 hours a week that they can dedicate, maybe four, and they're they're not looking to be told, oh, well, you can't play next week because your character was still outside before they got back to their starting location, or it's just no. When I slated Tuesday nights to play, I've slated Tuesday nights to play. All right, and I'm going to want to play my character each of those Tuesday nights, and not have to switch up characters because of some nonsense of the DM not just hand waving downtime in between sessions. You know, if they want to say that they spent a week someplace, you spent a week in the wilderness then, instead of having them go all the way back to town. It's like certain things need to be hand waved. I would just say, I would hand wave the time lapse and not treat it like it's been a whole week since you last played your game, but just say, well, no, it's only been 8 hours since you played your last game. All right. And in the meantime, this is what happened while you were, and then role play that out and then pick up the next morning with the continuation of their adventure. That's what adventure gear is for. All right. So let's see. Oh, sorry about that. I guess chat on your end might have glitched out. So let's see. Let's see. I'm looking for comments that are a little bit onto something new. Um, okay. um, okay, everyone's saying hello to each other. I got down to the bottom now, so I'm down finally to here. So Thirst and L and Cal and um, Eric, everyone's saying hello to each other, and that's always a good thing. All right, so let's get back to our banner just to remind ourselves. All right, so what is the real way to play D&D? And again, I open it up to everyone, and if anyone wants to jump in, there we go. I'm going to be here at least another half hour. Chatting along. From what I understand, some people have live streams coming up around 10. So I want to leave everybody a nice enough break. Plus, I have to take care of my dog before or in around 9:30. So we'll probably cut it off around there. So this came from a prompt actually pre-going live. The real way to play D&D is by playing DCC, or the right way, yes, or Castles and Crusades or something else. But many of us here see each other at Diversity and Dragons, the Basic Expert, RPG Pundit, live streams. We all hang out in the same circles. Yes. And you know what? Maybe that's that's something to be said as well, plus Legion of Myth and maybe a few others. Our group, and I'll call it our group of individuals, we do bounce around a lot to these other channels, but to be honest with you, it's kind of rare for those channels to frequent each other's channels, if you get what I mean, right? Like I've had Pundit on my channel, at least once, possibly twice. He's got twice. So he came onto my channel twice. I've never had Basic Expert on. Never had Diversity and Dragons on. I've had Max on several times, and Max has come in several times. I know you're bringing up Condor and Garibay. I have interviewed Garibay. All right, so I've had Garibay on my channel, and he currently has me banned. So I don't think he'll ever come on my channel again. Condor, I have said to Condor he is welcome to come on my channel. He has me blocked on his channel, so but he's welcome to come in here anytime that he wants. And he talks. He says that he doesn't think I would come on or invite him onto mine or whatever. That's there. It is. Condor, you can come in anytime you like. I will talk with you if you want to talk privately beforehand. I will not disrespect you. I will not call you names. I will not say anything. Just like when I had Garibay on my channel, I did not disrespect him. I did not, do anything, along the lines of would make him feel unwelcome on the channel. And I can talk with anyone, and I am not afraid to talk to anyone, and anyone is welcome on my channel. I only have maybe one person I've blocked on my channel, possibly two, for saying nasty things about my players. And one player in particular got very and uncalled for, just making a snide remark about the player, and so I banned that person. So I don't remember what that person's name is. So anyone is welcome on my channel, whether I disagreed with you, whether you think I hate you, which I don't. If you hate me, you're still welcome to come on my channel. Even if you hate me, come on here and and let's hash it out. I am not afraid to have a conversation with anyone. So I think legit Gary is going through. No, well, I don't want to talk about any kind of, whether he's just a confused person or if I'm not in the position to diagnose anyone. All I can say is that my big break with him, or what he got from me, was that I he would not accept that January is not the spring, believe it or not. And so I said that's delusional talk, and he got upset with that and demanded an apology. And I was like, well, if you admit that January is not the spring, then I will take it back. And he wouldn't. And so I said, all right, then I'm not taking it back. And so that was it. So I really don't pay that much attention to his stuff anymore because he's on his political spree now. And, I don't play Magic the Gathering. And so I couldn't care less about Magic the Gathering and what connections it makes to 5e, which I couldn't care less about either. And so none of that stuff really impacts my game in any way. But he's welcome to come on if he wants. So let's see. Real way to play D&D. Tell the story of the hero you most respect. Maybe not the person, but the soul, the idea. Right, yeah. I mean, if you're a player, that's certainly what you should be doing. Is you should be playing a heroic character, and that's, again, my opinion. You should be playing a heroic character. And even if you're playing an evil campaign, you can still be bold and even heroic. Even if you're playing an evil character, you can do things for your cause, as corrupt as it might be. That is still heroic. So, but that takes a whole different type of campaign that you're going to be involved in. So, if you're playing in an evil campaign, and I've run an evil campaign and I've played in evil campaigns, and they do tend to be very short-lived. And again, that goes back to something that Gary Gygax said too, in one of his comments on probably like Dragon's Foot or something like that. Oh, you could run an evil campaign. They're just not going to last very long. And he was probably right when he predicted that or saw that. But that's just that's just the nature of the thing. All right. Let's see what Elle's talking about here. It is increasingly glut in the OSR products. The real way to play D&D is Dolmenwood, Mashudal. I'm not familiar with that. Shadow Dark, Baptism by Fire. I don't know what you're really trying to say here. Are you saying that the glut is the OSR and that's the real way to play? Or I'm a little bit confused by that. Anyway, I just started looking at, it wasn't, I was looking at Dragon, what the heck is it? It's not Dragonborn. It's by Free League, right? So I was looking at it. I was like, all right, it's like $60 or $70 for the book and the screen and the set of dice. And then I thought back to myself. I was like, you know what? I will never run this game. I just know it. I know that I'll never run that game. Dragonbane, thank you. And I was sitting there. I had it all queued up, ready to hit that purchase button, and I said to myself, in just like the last moment of it, I'll never run this game. Now that doesn't mean that someone else isn't going to pick that thing up and that becomes their game of choice. So it depends on what the glut like what you really mean by a glut. I think that there's enough differentiation between all of the different games out there that there's definitely categories, right? So, your basic fantasy and your swords and wizardry and your shadow dark might be all very, very related to one another. There's virtually no difference between running Osric as opposed to running AD&D first edition, or for Golden Glory and second edition. Like if you have second edition, why are you running for Golden Glory? Or if you don't have second edition, then you should be running for Golden Glory if that's what you're looking for. You know what I'm saying? There's different categories that can be lumped together. And I said the same thing with OSC, right? Because OSC I thought was like a combination of BX and AD&D first edition. And I was like, well, I have both of them, so why do I need this game? And that's why I passed up OSC. Even though OSC gets a lot of coverage from people, I think, there probably is quite a number of people that do run OSC. I think Shadow Dark, I could see myself playing Shadow Dark or running Shadow Dark more so than I could Dragonbane or OSC. And so that's, that is what takes the glut out, is when you start picking the games that that you're going to run, and let the other ones exist here. Who cares? None of them are going to make a tremendous amount of money afterwards anyway. After their Kickstarters or after, none of them are going to be $1 million plus a year, game systems. So they're all going to be very niche, and they're all going to be, games that less than 10,000 people play. Unless, they strike lightning in the bottle and you get a, large number of people playing them. But, maybe Shadow Dark might pull that off. I'm not even sure. I mean, great numbers in Shadow Dark, but let's see what they actually produce after the fact. It's not glut, it's sparkling opportunity. Yeah, I mean it's just it is our opportunities, for these smaller companies to carve out a little niche. I don't think any of them expect to be the next D&D killer. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And it doesn't mean that you have to play a game system in its entirety. You can pull pieces from it and bring it to other games. So I wouldn't write it off as being totally useless glut. I would say that there's going to be different gems for different people in there. I don't consider 5e to be D&D. No, neither do I. The OSR is a difference of kind. That is for sure. Absolutely. So, and that's because you're agreeing with me, and that's pretty much what I say. So, not just the latest product. Oh my gosh. I go back to Tasha's. I said everything after Tasha's was not D&D anymore. I guess. Let's see. Just trying to tie the D&D topic into the OSR. And I don't know if you necessarily can, because I have never heard anyone make the argument, I've never heard anyone make the argument that you're playing the OSR right or wrong. Like, oh, that's the wrong way to play the OSR, or that's the right way to play. There's only one right way to play any OSR game that you want to pick. All right. I've never heard anybody say that. I've heard people say there's only one way to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, or there's no wrong way to play 5e. There's I've heard it associated with those, never with the OSR. Because I think everyone, when they look at the OSR, they know that the OSR is primarily homebrews of other games, just kind of stitched together, like a Frankenstein's monster. They're all stitched together from all a bunch of different ideas coming together into one product, and they're mutable right from the get-go. No one's arguing, oh, you have to play Swords and Wizardry raw. Never once heard anybody say that, or DCC. Oh, you have to play DCC raw. The book itself tells you not to do that, so it just doesn't exist in the OSR, where you see that kind of a concept being pushed in D&D. Yeah, I've seen this argued. It's the 2D system might be glut, and maybe some people should try to come up with some different dice systems just to change things up, and some are. I mean, there are games that are working off of like Savage Worlds game mechanics, or more skill-based game systems, like Call of Cthulhu is more skills based, and so on. And you have other games that are based on Rollmaster, or or on engines that you find in like Palladium books and that kind of thing. So there is a variety out there. It just seems that the fantasy focused OSR is tied a little bit too much to the D20 system. So and using the same kind of stats and everything, attribute. Oh, excuse me, that came out of nowhere. That was probably my double shot catching up to me. But anyway, let's see. Yeah, Eric agrees with me. I always highlight the agreements. But yeah, that's definitely a to me. And really, what makes that difference there is that's when Tasha's basically codified, because they're going to use that, where you can mix and match racial modifiers. I was like, all right, that's the end of, you just ended D&D at that point. All right, because it goes directly to what Gary Gygax said. You're no longer playing Dungeons and Dragons if you do that, and that's exactly what Tasha's did. So that's where I say it no longer D&D after that. So why does OSC get free pass but BX is shit on? I don't know who. I don't see who shits on BX. BX, I think, is probably the most popular of the D&D products from TSR. It is hand down. BECMI is hands down the best tabletop role-playing game to teach new players. And I know it's brought up here as well. I will play BECMI any day. Yes, BECMI is the best. All right, and I will argue this with anyone and produce reasons why, and in a practical dissertation as to why BECMI is the best to teach new players tabletop role-playing games. All right, and there's none compared to it. It just, from its writing, from its formatting, from its tiered learning, it's chunking of rules as you're going along. So you only need to know what you need to know today and tomorrow, and then once you get to the next day, you're gonna, you might have gone up a level, and so you need to learn another little piece here, and so on. And it is very, very structured that way. Great rules on how to be a dungeon master and what you need to do to create adventures and everything like that. A whole sequence of play that the players do on their own to learn the system, and then they come and they play that first adventure with the game master, for the first time. So it is by far the best system I've seen, and I'll continue to argue that. Yeah, BX gets a lot of love. I don't know of anyone who looks at whether it be Holmes Edition or Moldvay Cook, um, bad mouthing BX and games even based on BX. Um, they're you know yeah, there might have been, like, I kind of missed out on the AD&D 1 edition and 2 edition, like, fallout amongst them. I just know, looking back at it, having kind of skipped over that time period, um, I would have never gotten into all the Splat books, even though I have them all right behind me there. You can see my 2nd edition collection right behind me. I would have never bought all of that as a teenager or young adult back then when that came out. That would have turned me off from the hobby, or certainly from Dungeons and Dragons right from the get-go there. I didn't play much of Dungeons and Dragons after 1987-ish. And I was mostly doing Twilight 2000 at that point, until and that was only up through like 89 or so. And then I joined the service in 90, and then I wasn't doing tabletop role-playing games. At that point, I was like one of those, I guess, rare people in the military where I never played Dungeons and Dragons in the military. I was more focused on playing cards, playing dice, shooting dice, and PlayStation, when we had adequate electricity, to play those games, but was not doing D&D during that time frame. You like percent? Hey, how's it going, OSR night? Yep, percentile. Except for Star Frontiers, I wasn't too crazy about it in Star Frontiers. I thought that was a weakness of that system. Although I liked aesthetically the game, and I liked how I liked the lore and the story behind the game, and I like what skills were there. I just didn't like the skill resolution tables, and especially once I got to Zebulon's Guide. So big. I mean, I did the GURPS thing and all of that too, the skill-based systems and everything. Percentile dice, it really does depend on how the system actually uses it, and you need some variations. Yeah, Rules Encyclopedia is kind of like the whole Bible of D&D Basic, right? The reason why I would still take BECME over the Rules Encyclopedia is because I wouldn't want my players to know everything that they'll be able to do when they're level 20, or 30, or whatever Rules Encyclopedia, like off the top of my head, I'm not remembering. It might go up to 36. But yeah, I wouldn't want them to think about that. That's what I like about BECME. BECME, basic, they're only going to be able to see what they can do from 1 to 3. And that's it. And then, the next one takes them from 4 to 12, 4 to 13. Again, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. And most people stop at that point. Most people don't even get to companion, and then masters, and virtually nobody plays immortals. I mean, even Even Frank Metzner says Immortals is not Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, some still say it's a kid's game or whatever. It's simple, but to me, that's the purest form of D&D. I mean, that gets back to, and that's a nostalgia thing, I know, but it's still D&D. No matter how you slice it, it's more D&D than 5e is. Yeah, I'm particularly talking about the 83. Um, the 81 box set or the 80 box set was the first one that I got. That was the magenta box. The 81, that's Moldvay. Yeah, yeah, 81 is Moldvay. I recently picked up 3.5 and I haven't completed like digging through it very much. I picked it up just to have it because, from what I understand, a lot of people within the OSR say that 3.5 is the version that many OSR games are founded off of. And maybe that's because it's the SRD 3.5 that many of them are using. And so they equate it to that system. um, but I haven't dug deep enough into 3.5 to really make that judge. Maybe that's something I'll get back to covering again is 3.5 because I do have all three core books and I'll start going through those again. Um, so we have mention of FASA, which I actually have and was talking about that the other day. Um, Warhammer Fantasy. I looked at that back in the day, and even though I liked what it looked like I was playing a tabletop war game. At least that's how I read it through my 15-year-old eyes when I first saw it and was thinking about giving it a try. Um, my friend bought it. My dungeon master bought it, but we actually never played it. We never used it. I don't think any of us really liked it over AD&D First Edition. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, same with me, Eric. That was the first box set I owned. I started playing about 3 years before that, but that was the first one that I actually owned. Yeah, you would have played 2000 also. Yeah. Yeah, that's when I switched, I moved right to that. Your players read your players read the rule books. My players are so my group of players are on average over 40. So I can almost guarantee you that they've read the rule books. Um, and but they're not reading them at the table. But they have a pretty good working knowledge of the rules. And when we come across things that we're kind of questioning, we'll take a look at it after the game session, and double check it unless it's something that is such a pivotal moment in the time. But usually they just, we haven't really had that happen yet. We've had some disputes over like spell effects and that kind of thing, um, which is nice because the Roll20 has the spell effects. So when you cast a spell, you can actually look at the like a very brief breakdown of what the spell actually does as a quick refresher. And yet that kind of breaks the momentum a little bit. But in most cases, the player is just very quickly telling me what the spell is supposed to do and how it works, and then they've already chosen to cast it, and then we just go forward with the necessary dice rolls for it to see how effective it is, and then I roll saving throws if they apply for who they're casting it at, and then we move on. So, but yes, my players have probably read the rule books and probably dozens, if not more times. But they are certainly not rules lawyers. All right, let's see. Well, it's either Holmes or it's expert. If you're talking about the monochrome, if you're talking about, like, if you look behind me over there, you see that blue one? That's the expert box. Holmes is not monochrome. So that's expert. You're talking expert. That's the second box after the red box, the first red box of basic. So let's see. The original. Oh, which one don't you have, Thurston Howell? I only recently, like last year, finally nabbed a copy of the expanded deities and demigods, the 144-page deities and demigods, and I got it for like 120, which was a steal, because that's so hard to find, and to get it for, I've seen that go as high as like $200. And so when I nabbed mine at 120, I was like, oh, I can't believe that I actually got this. And so now I have both. I have the regular one, the 128 and the 144. So, and that was the last piece that I really needed to complete my my collection of 1E stuff. Okay. Well, have we established? Let's start wrapping this up. And have we established that there is no real way to play? Yeah, you have your OD deities and demigods. Yep. I had at one point bought Legends and Lore, and then once I scored the deities and demigods for like $60, the regular one, then I was like, all right, I don't need this Legends and Lore anymore. So I sent that, I sold that off, and then like a couple months later, I scored the second version, the older version of deities and demigods. And you keep on saying, going back to that. No real way to play. I try out Castles and Crusades, and you might change your mind a little bit there. That's all I'm saying. Is that if you're looking for something more D&D-esque, then Castles and Crusades is a different carryover, and probably a better carryover than that. So are we still wondering which is the blue box? I missed the I do like Castles and Crusades. I do own that, but I'm just in love with DCC Magic System. Yeah, the Magic System is a lot of fun. It's very unpredictable. I kind of like that. You can always import the Magic System to other games. The monochrome D&D cover for the rulebook is Holmes Basic. in my hands at this way. Yeah, so I when he said monochrome blue, that's not the box though. He mentioned the single, like, to me monochrome is like one solid blue, and the solid blue box cover is the other one. You know what? I recently read someone mentioning the funnels, and what they said was that too many people think of DCC as just the funnels, and that's all that they ever play. And maybe they were talking about convention play. That's all they ever do is that, and they really don't push it beyond that. So and I don't know how fair that is. I don't know how often people actually go beyond who's running that first session. But I've heard enough people claiming that that's you always see that at conventions where people are running DCC and beginning with the funnel and then doing like a first introductory adventure and very rarely playing anything or running anything at high level. But again, that's very limited to just my own what I've heard. Some people don't, and they don't consider themselves to be OSR. And that's an interesting thing, too. Like Troll Lord Games do not say that Castles and Crusades is OSR. They are because they're not a retro clone, they're not a Renaissance, and they're not a revival. They're a natural extension of AD&D First Edition. Stopping just short of second edition, but borrowing some components from third edition. So, I've had people say it's, AD&D 1.75, but clearly skipping over to not having the feats that are in 3, but there are certain elements in 3 that find their way into Castles and Crusades. So they don't claim to be it's an OSR game. I don't. It came out before. It came out before 3.5. I'm fairly certain it came out before 3.5, so it can't be 3.5ish. It came out. When did 3.5 come out? Maybe I'm mistaken. I will always admit that. D&D 3.5. It came out the same. It came out the same year. 3 came out in 2000, 2001. 3.5 came out in 2003, and CNC was completed and published in 2004, I think. So I don't think it could have taken very much from 3.5. It would have been already after their writing cycle, and Gary was still working with them at that time as well. So I don't think they were borrowing very much from. They might have taken from 3.0, and I've heard that they did take some of the systems from 3.0, but not 3.5. 3.5 was not 2001. It was 2003. It took them. It was 3 years after 3.0. At least according to Wiki here. It says 2003 third edition revised 3.5. I don't think that anything has to be apologized for CNC. So it doesn't need any apologies. It's an awesome system. And some people argue that too. Yeah. I've seen some people argue that 2.0 is not D&D either. Um, yeah, I can't speak to that, Al. I don't know if 3.5 is the wrong way to play D&D. Um, like I said, I've only recently bought it. Probably within this year, I bought it, and I haven't fully dug into it deep enough to actually make that call. But a lot of 3.5 finds its way into the OSR. All right. I'm sure you're joking. Huh. Yeah, I'm sure that's a joke. Um, and to be honest with you, I don't really like Pathfinder because again, it's just very. I don't like a very overly complicated action mechanic, or economy. I don't like the action economy. So I don't like multi layers of all kinds of things that you can do. Oh, if your attack doesn't work, you get this, or you get an automatic response, and then you get second wind, and you could do this, or it's just way too many chances to make up for your first missed die roll, and to me, that's not. That's like mastery of learning kind of way where you get multiple chances to succeed rather than just dealing with a failure and waiting until the next round to try to recover from it and to respond to whatever mishap is the result of it. Ever group playing five. There was a lot to remember. Yeah, it's a very bloated system. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it probably is very, very complex with all those feats, feats and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of systems that use a whole lot of feats. Just too many, like in stackable and interchangeable and all kinds of stuff. It's playing a video game. Okay, it is about 9:15. So hey guys, I'm going to wrap this up, and I really appreciate you all popping in. And I got to go feed my dog and get her ready for going to bed. Can't wait till my wife and kids are home tomorrow and they can take care of the dog at night. So tomorrow morning I have a CNC video that's going to pop on at 6 a.m. I am also going to hey Nemor Cowboy. Well, if I didn't see you earlier on, well, welcome. Sorry I didn't notice you in there. I don't think you just popped in now. But yeah, so that video is going up at 6 a.m. And then tomorrow night I have my first edition AD&D first edition game, so I'm really looking forward to that. That should be a good action-packed one. I didn't do the recap from this past week. It's been kind of busy the last couple of days, but I will wait until after that one to do the recap there. So, and thank you, Thurston Howell. Thank you for coming in, and OSR Night. Are we playing next Thursday? I think we might be, or no. No, we just pay. No, next Thursday. We're up this Thursday upcoming. So looking forward to that. That'll be cool. And as always, everyone, thanks for dropping in, and you'll have a good night. and good week coming up. And I will be producing videos throughout the rest of the week. So you have a great one. Take care.